Daniel had lived on his small ranch for so many years that even the animals seemed to know his quiet habits. Every morning, before the sun even touched the horizon, he would step outside with his old hat pushed low, boots still carrying yesterday's dust, and his slow but steady walk toward the stables. His horses would lift their heads the moment they heard him. They trusted him, the way only animals can, without question, without doubt. Daniel never spoke much, but he always treated them gently, as if they were his closest friends. In truth, they were the closest he had. People in the nearby town often said he had a good heart, but carried too many silent memories. No one knew the details, and he never explained. Life had taught him to keep his thoughts guarded, to show strong behavior but keep his feelings quiet. He wasn't unfriendly. He just didn't know how to let anyone in. Months could pass without him having a true conversation with another person. He didn't complain. The wide fields, the calm breeze, and the steady rhythm of ranch work were enough to fill his days. But loneliness has a way of slipping into the spaces between chores. Sometimes, when he sat on his porch in the evening, watching the sun melt into orange and gold, he felt a weight in his chest, a feeling that life was moving forward without him, while he stayed exactly where he had always been. He wasn't unhappy. He just wasn't anything in particular. Quiet days followed quiet days, and life felt like a long, empty road with no change ahead. One especially cold evening, the wind blew harder than usual. The sky was covered with thick gray clouds that warned of rain. Daniel had been working longer than he planned. A fence had broken, and one of his horses had wandered off earlier in the day. By the time he fixed the fence and found the horse, the temperature had dropped. His hands were stiff with cold, and his clothes were wet from walking through tall grass that held moisture from the morning. Even a tough cowboy like him needed warmth sometimes. Instead of going straight home, he decided to stop by a small roadside cafe near the highway. It was a quiet place that stayed open late, mostly for travelers passing through. Daniel didn't visit it often, but when he did, he usually sat alone, had a simple hot meal, and then returned to his ranch without talking much. He wasn't expecting anything different this time. When he pushed the door open, the bell above it gave a soft ring. The warm air inside touched his cold face, and he felt relieved just to step out of the wind. A few people sat scattered around the cafe, some reading, some drinking tea or coffee. The scent of fresh bread and soup filled the room. Daniel removed his hat, brushed off the dust, and walked toward his usual corner. But before he could sit, something caught his attention: a woman, sitting alone at a table near the window. She wasn't drinking anything. Her hands were wrapped around an empty mug, as if she didn't know whether to stay or leave. Her shoulders were slightly shaking, not from cold but from worry. Her eyes kept moving from the door to the window, as if she feared something or someone outside. Daniel didn't stare. It wasn't his nature. But there was something unusual about her presence, a quiet sadness that made even a man like him pause. She looked young, maybe late 20s, with long hair tied loosely, and clothes that looked like she had rushed out without planning. There was exhaustion on her face, not the kind that comes from physical effort, but from emotional weight. He finally took his seat, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that the woman needed help. He tried to focus on the menu the waitress handed him, but his eyes kept returning to her, without meaning to. Every few moments, she would inhale deeply, as if trying to calm herself. Every now and then, she would whisper something under her breath, too soft for anyone else to hear. It was clear she wasn't just having a normal quiet evening. Something important, something heavy, was sitting on her mind. The waitress came by with Daniel's soup. But even she looked at the woman with concern. "She came in almost an hour ago," the waitress whispered to Daniel quietly. "Hasn't ordered, hasn't eaten. I tried asking if she needed help, but she only said she's fine." Daniel nodded politely, though he wasn't sure why the waitress chose him to share that. Maybe people sensed he wasn't the type to judge others. Maybe they believed he could listen. Minutes passed, and the woman finally lifted her head and looked around the cafe again. This time, her eyes met Daniel's by accident. She quickly looked away at first, then slowly looked back with a hesitant expression, as if she wasn't sure whether she should speak or stay silent. Daniel gave a small, gentle nod, not a greeting, just a signal that he wasn't bothered by her presence. That tiny gesture seemed to give her courage. She stood up, holding her small bag tightly, and walked toward his table. Daniel didn't move, didn't shift uncomfortably. He simply waited, sensing she needed space to gather her thoughts. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Daniel set his spoon down and looked at her respectfully. "Can I sit here for a minute?" she asked. I don't know where else to sit." Daniel nodded again, giving her the seat across from him. She sat slowly, carefully, like someone afraid of taking up too much space. "My name is Emily," she said, barely above a whisper. "Daniel," he replied simply. She gave a small nod, looking at her hands instead of at him. She looked nervous, the way someone looks when they're trying to leave a difficult situation behind and don't know if they are making the right decision. Daniel didn't push her with questions. He sensed she wasn't ready to explain anything. After a long silence, she finally whispered. Daniel didn't understand what she meant at first, so he responded gently. "Done what?" She swallowed hard, choosing her words with care. "Travel alone. Leave without a plan. Sit with a stranger because it feels safer than sitting alone." Daniel felt something shift inside him. He had seen fear before in animals, in people, even in himself at times, but this was different. Her words carried trust, but also hesitation. "You don't have to explain anything," he said quietly. "But you don't look like you're okay. If you need help getting somewhere safe, I can help." Her eyes lifted just a little, enough to meet his again. This time, there was a hint of relief in them, like she found a sense of safety she didn't expect. She nodded slowly, as if agreeing with herself, before agreeing with him. Outside, the wind began to rise, and the cafe lights flickered slightly as rain started tapping against the windows. The night was growing colder, darker, and more dangerous for someone alone. Daniel could feel it. Emily could feel it too. That simple moment, her soft whisper, his calm answer. The storm building outside became the beginning of a night that neither of them would forget. A night that would change the lonely cowboy's quiet world and give a frightened stranger her first taste of safety in a long, long time. Daniel watched Emily quietly as she sat across from him, her eyes still full of worry but slowly gaining a little confidence. The storm outside had become stronger, and rain was hitting the cafe windows with steady force, making the sound of the wind even louder. The other customers had already left, and the place felt almost empty now, except for the soft buzz of the lights and the smell of warm soup lingering in the air. Emily held her small bag close to her chest as if it carried the last pieces of her life. Daniel could tell that her journey had not been easy. After a few long moments of silence, she finally breathed deeply, trying to organize her thoughts. "I didn't plan anything," she said softly. "I just left. I didn't know where to go. I just kept walking. Then someone dropped me at the highway, and I ended up here." Daniel listened carefully, giving small nods, but not interrupting her. He understood that she needed a space where she could talk without being judged or questioned too quickly. Emily seemed like someone who had been carrying a lot alone for a long time, and now it was spilling out in bits and pieces. She twisted her fingers together nervously and whispered again, "I haven't done this before." There was no shame in her voice, only fear of the unknown. She looked at Daniel, as if hoping that he would understand her confusion without needing every detail. "You did the right thing," Daniel finally said in his slow, steady voice. "If you felt unsafe or unhappy where you were, leaving was the brave choice. Not easy, but brave." Emily gave him a small, tired smile. It wasn't a happy smile, but it showed that his words mattered to her. I just didn't know what else to do, she admitted. Everything felt too heavy at home. I felt like I was losing myself. No one listened to me. No one cared how I felt. Daniel understood that feeling more than he expected. He had spent many years living quietly, carrying unanswered questions and silent thoughts. He knew how heavy loneliness could become. He didn't say that out loud, but Emily seemed to sense that he understood more than he showed. The waitress came by to clear the empty tables, and Daniel ordered Emily a warm drink without asking her. When the mug arrived, Emily wrapped her hands around it with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't even realize how cold I was until now." Daniel nodded again, his eyes soft but calm. For a long moment, Emily stared down at the steam rising from her drink, watching it swirl gently. It seemed to give her the courage to open up more. "I kept thinking someone would come after me," she confessed quietly. "Not because they cared, but because they didn't want me making my own choices. That's why I kept looking at the door." Daniel didn't ask who she meant. He didn't want to bring fear back to her face. Instead, he gave her reassurance without pressing for details. "No one is coming here tonight," he said. "The storm is too strong. Roads will be empty." She exhaled slowly, as if letting go of a heavy breath she had been holding for hours. The tension in her shoulders seemed to loosen slightly. The cafe light reflected softly on her face, showing a mix of fear, relief, and exhaustion. "So, where do you want to go?" Daniel asked gently. Not as pressure, but as a way to help her think about the next step. "I don't know," she whispered. "I hadn't thought that far. I just wanted to get away. I told myself I would figure it out once I reached the next town. But now, I'm here and everything feels too confusing." Daniel looked toward the window. The rain was pouring heavily, turning the parking lot into a blur of water. It was clear that traveling anywhere in this weather would be too dangerous. Even he, with all his experience driving in rough conditions, wouldn't attempt it in the dark. "It's not safe to be out tonight," he said softly. "Not in this storm. If you want, I can help you find a place to stay for the night. A safe place." Emily instantly looked worried again. "A hotel?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "But not much. I don't know how long it will last." Daniel shook his head gently. "There's a small lodge nearby. It's simple, not expensive. I know the owner. They're honest people. You don't have to worry." Emily looked relieved, but another fear quickly appeared on her face. "I'm afraid to go alone," she whispered. "It's dark. And the storm." She stopped, unable to finish her sentence. Daniel understood. Even a strong person would feel insecure walking out into this weather without knowing the area. He didn't think twice. "I'll drive you there," he offered. "It's just 15 minutes from here." Emily stared at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. She saw none. Daniel had always carried a calm, trustworthy expression, shaped by years of honest living and hard work. He didn't promise more than he could give, but whatever he did promise, he meant sincerely. "Thank you," she said in a shaky breath. "I don't know why you're helping me. You don't even know me." Daniel shrugged lightly, not in a careless way but in a humble one. "You don't need to know someone to help them," he replied. "Sometimes, people just need a little kindness." Emily's eyes softened as she held her drink closer. She didn't say anything for a while. Maybe because she was overwhelmed from finally finding someone who didn't question her, didn't blame her, and didn't make her feel small. After a few minutes, Daniel paid the bill and stood up. Emily rose as well, gripping her bag tightly. When they stepped outside, the wind pushed against them, making Emily shiver instantly. Daniel placed his hat back on and opened the truck door for her. The gesture surprised her, because she wasn't used to someone treating her with simple respect. Not recently, at least. She climbed inside, and Daniel carefully closed the door before going around to his side. The truck engine started with a heavy rumble, and the headlights cut through the rain just enough to see the road ahead. Emily kept her hands close to her chest, watching the raindrops race across the window. "You okay?" Daniel asked gently as he began driving. She nodded, though he could see her nerves through her movements. "You're doing fine," he replied. The road was quiet. No other vehicles were out, and the storm only grew louder. Emily watched the blurred shapes of trees pass by and felt strangely safe in the warm interior of the truck. Daniel drove with steady hands, not too fast, not too slow, making sure she felt secure. After a few minutes, the road curved, and the rain became heavier. Daniel slowed down even more. Emily finally whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me alone back there." Daniel didn't take his eyes off the road, but he answered with quiet honesty, "I couldn't." For the first time that night, Emily felt her fear ease. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But right now, she wasn't alone. She was with someone who meant no harm. Someone who cared enough to help without asking anything in return. In that moment, as the truck moved through the stormy night, something began to shift inside both of them slowly, quietly, like the first spark of light in a dark sky. The cowboy who had spent years living in silence had opened his world to a stranger. And the stranger who had spent months feeling lost had finally found someone who made her feel safe. Neither of them knew it yet. But this simple act of kindness was the beginning of a bond that would change their lives in ways they didn't expect. The rain kept falling harder as Daniel drove, and the sound of it hitting the truck roof created a steady rhythm that filled the silence between them. Emily sat quietly, her eyes watching the road but her mind far away. Every now and then, she glanced at Daniel, as if checking that he was still the same calm, steady person who had offered her help without asking anything in return. She wasn't used to this kind of kindness. It confused her and comforted her at the same time. After about 15 minutes, the headlights lit up a small wooden sign on the right side of the road. Daniel slowed the truck even more. "This is the lodge I told you about," he said gently. "It's simple, but it's safe." Emily nodded without speaking. But when Daniel turned into the narrow driveway leading to the lodge, the sky suddenly lit up with a flash of lightning. The thunder followed almost instantly, loud and deep. Emily gasped softly and gripped the seat. Daniel noticed the reaction and lowered the speed again. "You don't like storms?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Never have," she replied. "Especially not when I'm already scared." Daniel gave a small, understanding nod. "We'll get inside," he said. "You won't be out here long. Du calm. Load. Du calm. Du calm. Du calm. Du calm." But as he drove closer to the lodge, they both noticed something unexpected. The small building was completely dark. No lights in the windows. No faint glow from the porch lamp. Even the signboard wasn't lit. Daniel frowned. "That's strange," he muttered. "They should be open." He pulled up in front of the entrance anyway. Rain was pouring down the windshield so heavily now that everything outside looked blurry. Emily clutched her bag a little tighter. "Is it closed?" She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Daniel leaned forward and tried to see through the darkness. "Maybe the power is out," he said. "Storm might have knocked it down." Storm. He turned off the engine but kept the headlights on to brighten the muddy ground. Then he reached for his jacket. "Stay in the truck," he told her gently. "I'll check." Emily nodded, though her eyes followed his every move. He opened the door, and rain hit him instantly. But he barely reacted. Daniel was used to storms. He walked across the short distance to the lodge entrance and tried the door. Locked. He knocked a few times, then stepped back to look around. The whole place seemed deserted. He returned to the truck, shaking water from his hat before climbing in. "No one's here," he said. Emily's face fell a little. She wasn't expecting luxury, but she had hoped for a warm room and a safe bed. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. Daniel looked out at the storm again. The wind pushed against the truck hard enough to make it rock slightly. "The roads are too dangerous," he said. "We can't keep driving in this weather." He paused for a moment, thinking. His ranch was closer than any other place. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, safe, and dry. He turned back to her with gentle honesty. "Emily, the safest place right now is my ranch." She looked at him, surprised but not frightened. Daniel could see she was thinking carefully. She didn't seem afraid of him. She seemed afraid of trusting the wrong person, but something about Daniel had already shown her he wasn't that kind of danger. "You don't have to be scared," he said quietly. "I'll give you a room. You'll be safe there. And tomorrow, when the storm passes, I'll help you get wherever you want." Emily didn't answer immediately. She stared at the rain outside, then at Daniel. Something in his eyes, steady, honest, patient, helped her make her decision. She took a slow breath and nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I trust you." Daniel didn't smile widely, but a soft, calm relief touched his expression. "Good," he said. "Let's get you warm." He put the truck back in drive and slowly backed out of the lodge's driveway. The tires fought against the mud for a moment, before gaining enough grip to move forward. The road back toward his ranch felt even darker now, with only flashes of lightning offering brief glimpses of the world around them. Emily leaned her head lightly against the window, watching the rain slide down the glass in winding paths. She wasn't thinking about the past for once. She was thinking about how strange it felt to trust someone she had just met. But Daniel's quiet presence made her feel something she hadn't felt in months: safe. Not judged. Not controlled. Just safe. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. He didn't talk much. Not because he didn't want to, but because he sensed she needed the silence. Sometimes, silence is more comforting than words. After some minutes, Emily finally broke it. "You live alone?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Just me and the horses," he said. "Been that way for a long time." "Doesn't it get lonely?" she asked gently. Daniel took a moment before answering. "Sometimes," he said simply. "But I learned how to live with it." Emily looked at him with quiet sympathy. She understood loneliness better than she wanted to admit. It was something they both carried, though in different ways. The road soon opened into a wide stretch of land, and through the rain-streaked darkness, Emily saw the outline of a barn and a small house. A warm, golden light glowed from one of the windows. Daniel had left his porch lamp on before leaving earlier in the day. "That's home," he said, as he drove up the path. The truck stopped near the porch. Daniel turned off the engine, and the sudden quietness made the storm seem even louder. He got out first and hurried around to her side, opening the door and shielding her from the rain with his jacket as best he could. Emily rushed toward the porch, trying not to slip on the wet steps. Once they were both inside, Daniel removed his wet jacket and hung it by the door. Emily looked around slowly. The house wasn't large, but it felt warm and welcoming. The air smelled faintly of wood and coffee. A soft fire glowed in the fireplace, giving the room a gentle orange light. "You can sit by the fire," Daniel said. "I'll bring you a towel." Emily nodded and sat on a small rug near the fire, soaking in the warmth. For the first time that night, she felt her hands stop shaking. Daniel returned with a clean towel and handed it to her. She dried her hair, her face, and her hands, feeling more alive with every passing second. "You must be cold," Daniel said. "Let me make you something warm to drink." "You don't have to," she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I want to." Emily watched him move around the small kitchen, taking out a pot, heating milk, adding tea leaves, and a pinch of sugar. His movements were calm, steady, practiced. She felt like she was watching a man who had lived his entire life taking care of things quietly without expecting anything back. When he handed her the warm mug, she wrapped her hands around it gratefully. "Thank you, Daniel," she whispered. He nodded and sat down across from her, not too close, giving her space. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly, the storm thundering outside like a distant drum. Then Emily took a breath and said, "I left because I couldn't stay where I was anymore. I felt trapped. I felt small. Too. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't ask for more. He simply listened. Emily continued slowly, her voice trembling from emotion rather than fear. "I didn't know if leaving was right or wrong. I just knew staying would break me. And tonight, I felt so lost until—" Daniel looked at her with a calm, steady expression. "You're not lost anymore," he said quietly. "You're safe tonight. Tomorrow will bring clearer thoughts." Emily felt tears fill her eyes, not from sadness but from a strange, gentle relief. She wiped them quickly before they could fall. Daniel noticed but didn't comment. He just added, "You're stronger than you think." Something in his voice, soft, sincere, steady, helped her believe him. That night, sitting near the fire in a stranger's home, Emily felt warmth not just in her hands, but in her heart. And Daniel, who had lived so long in silence, felt the presence of someone who made the house feel less empty. Neither of them realized it, but this simple night, this quiet room, this storm outside, this unexpected trust was shaping their lives into something new. Morning came quietly, without the loud roar of thunder or the restless sound of heavy rain. Instead, soft sunlight began to slip through the thin curtains in the small room where Emily had slept. For the first time in many days, she woke up without fear gripping her chest. She opened her eyes slowly and looked around. The room was simple: a small bed, a wooden chair, a folded quilt at the foot of the bed, and a window overlooking the ranch. It wasn't fancy, but it felt peaceful, warm, and safe. She sat up and took a moment just to breathe. The storm had passed sometime during the night. When Emily stood and drew the curtain aside, she saw the wide fields covered in fresh morning light. Drops of rain still clung to the grass, shining like tiny crystals. The sky was pale blue, with soft white clouds drifting lazily. She could see the barn in the distance, and closer to the house, she saw movement. Daniel was already awake. He stood near the horse pen, brushing one of his chestnut-colored horses. The gentle creature lowered its head, as if trusting him completely. Daniel moved slowly, with calm and practiced motions, speaking softly to the horse, even though Emily couldn't hear the words. He looked peaceful, focused, and deeply at home in the world around him. Watching him like this, Emily felt something warm in her chest, a quiet admiration, mixed with gratitude. She took her time getting ready, splashing water on her face and brushing her hair with her fingers. She had nothing with her except the small bag she'd carried out of her old life. But she felt lighter than she had in months. When she finally stepped out of the room, she walked slowly toward the kitchen, where the smell of something warm greeted her instantly. Daniel had left a pot on the stove, and a note beside it written in simple, neat handwriting. "Milk tea on the stove. I'm outside if you need anything." Emily smiled softly at the note. It was such a small thing, but it showed a kind of care she hadn't felt for a long time. She poured herself a cup and held it close, feeling the warmth fill her hands. For a moment she stood by the window, just watching Daniel work. He didn't know she was watching, which made the scene feel even more honest and gentle. After finishing her tea, Emily stepped outside. The morning air was cool but pleasant, carrying the scent of wet earth and grass. Daniel looked up when he heard her footsteps and gave her a small nod, his version of a warm greeting. "You slept well?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. Better than I have in a long time. That's good. Daniel returned to brushing the horse, but his voice carried a hint of relief. Emily walked closer, stopping near the wooden fence. Your ranch is beautiful, she said. Daniel gave a quiet shrug. It's home. Emily watched his hands as he worked. His movements were steady, never rushed. The horses seemed completely at ease with him. Do you do this every morning? She asked. Every morning, he replied. They depend on routine. Animals like calm, makes them feel secure. Emily's eyes softened. You take good care of them. Daniel wiped the brush on a cloth and then turned toward her. They take good care of me too, he said with a small, almost shy smile. Emily understood what he meant. The animals filled the silence in his life, gave him purpose, gave him company. She looked at him, then at the horses, and felt her heart soften in a way she hadn't expected. Do you want to meet them? He asked gently. Emily's eyes widened slightly. Can I? Of course, he said. He opened the small gate and guided her in carefully. The horses lifted their heads, curious, but not frightened. Daniel placed his hand on one horse's neck. This here is Willow, he said. She's the calmest of them all. Emily reached out slowly, unsure if the horse would accept her. Willow took a small step closer, then pressed her warm muzzle into Emily's hand. Emily gasped softly, surprised by how gentle the animal felt. Daniel watched her reaction with quiet amusement. She likes you, he said. Emily smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. It was the first true smile Daniel had seen from her since the night they met. After spending some time with the horses, Daniel and Emily walked back to the porch. The sunlight had grown brighter, and the soft warmth made the morning feel hopeful. Daniel leaned against the railing while she stood across from him, holding onto the wooden post. So, Daniel said gently, what's your plan today? Emily lowered her eyes. She had been trying not to think about it, but now the question stood in front of her like a crossroads. I don't know, she whispered honestly. Yesterday, I only wanted to run away. Today, I don't feel lost anymore, but I still don't know where I should go. Changing. Today sighed. And in 2014, Daniel nodded slowly. You don't have to decide everything right away. You can take your time. Sometimes, the best decisions come when you stop rushing. Emily looked at him with quiet appreciation. Thank you for saying that. Daniel wasn't a man who gave big speeches, but the few words he chose always seemed to land softly and truthfully. She took a small breath. What about you? She asked. Were you always alone here? Daniel looked out over the fields, thinking. Not always, he said. But life has a way of changing things. Some people leave. Some things don't work out. And sometimes, you just end up on your own. His voice wasn't sad, just honest. Emily listened carefully. She could feel the weight of his quiet loneliness, different from hers, but still familiar. But you're strong, she said softly. Daniel gave a small, surprised chuckle. I don't know about that, but I get up every morning, do the work, and hope the day goes well. That's enough for me. Emily looked at him with new understanding. He lived a simple life, but it wasn't empty. It had meaning. It had peace. After a moment, Daniel turned back to her. If you want, he said gently, you can stay here for today. Rest a little more. Think clearly. I'll help you figure things out. Emily hesitated, then nodded slowly. You can, he assured her. You're safe here. And she believed him. They spent the morning walking around the ranch. Daniel showed her the chicken coop, the tool shed, the small vegetable garden he tended himself. Emily listened, asked questions, and slowly let herself relax. Every moment on the ranch felt like placing another piece of order back into her scattered life. By midday, Daniel prepared a simple lunch, eggs, toast, and warm tea. They ate on the porch with the breeze brushing against them. Emily watched the open sky and felt her heart growing lighter. "Do you ever travel?" she asked him gently. Daniel shook his head. "Not much reason to," he said. "Everything I need is here." Emily smiled softly. "I think you like quiet." Daniel gave a small nod. Quiet doesn't hurt. She understood that deeply. After lunch, she helped him feed the animals. She wasn't used to ranch work, but Daniel guided her with patience. She laughed once, just once, but the sound surprised both of them. It was soft and warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Daniel didn't say anything, but he felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. As the day grew older, Emily realized how much healing she had done without realizing it. She hadn't thought once about the things she ran from. She hadn't cried. She hadn't trembled. She had simply lived, breathed, and felt like a human being again. Later in the evening, as the sun began to set behind the hills, she stood near the fence and whispered, "Maybe coming here was not an accident." Daniel, standing beside her, looked at her calmly. She turned to him with gentle eyes. "Thank you for everything." Daniel nodded, his voice low and honest. "You don't owe me thanks. I just did what any decent person would do." But Emily knew it was more than that. She knew many people would have ignored her fear, her confusion, her loneliness. Many would have walked past her without even noticing her shaking hands. But Daniel had stopped, listened, and offered safety with no expectations. That made him different. As the last light of the day touched the sky, Emily felt something new. A small sense of hope, a gentle strength returning to her. Life didn't feel terrifying anymore. Tomorrow was still unknown, but it no longer frightened her. And Daniel, standing silently beside her, realized that his quiet world didn't feel quite so empty anymore. The house, the ranch, the wide open fields, they all felt a little warmer than they did before. Something had changed between them, not loudly, not dramatically, but softly, like the morning sun rising after a long night. The next morning arrived with a calm beauty that almost didn't feel real. The air was cool, the ground still soft from yesterday's storm, and the sky slowly turned from pale gray to warm gold. Emily stepped outside the small room again, and she paused for a moment when she felt the quiet of the ranch embrace her. There was no rush, no fear, no loud voices demanding explanations. Only the natural rhythm of sunrise, birdsong, and the distant sound of horses moving in their pen. For a long moment she simply breathed, feeling a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in a very long time. She wrapped her fingers around her warm cup of tea and walked toward the porch. Daniel was already outside, sitting on the steps with his elbows resting on his knees, watching the horizon as if the rising sun was an old friend. He didn't turn when she approached. He seemed lost in thought, peaceful but thoughtful. Emily sat down beside him quietly. Neither of them spoke at first. Words sometimes felt too heavy for moments like this. The world around them did all the talking, the soft whistle of a morning breeze, the faint clucking of chickens waking up, the gentle sound of horses shifting their weight. Finally, Daniel glanced at her. "Morning," he said in his calm voice. "Morning," she replied softly. He studied her face for a moment, noticing the calm in her eyes. "You look rested," he said. "I feel rested," she answered honestly. "I don't remember the last time I opened my eyes without fear." Daniel didn't smile widely, but a quiet warmth touched his expression. He seemed content just knowing she felt safe. After finishing their tea, Daniel stood up and brushed the dust from his jeans. "I'll take care of the animals," he said. "You're welcome to join me. Or you can rest more if you want." Emily responded without hesitation. "I'll come with you." Part of her didn't want to waste a single minute of this peaceful morning. And another part wanted to stay near Daniel, even if neither of them said that out loud. They walked together toward the barn. The sun rose higher, painting everything in warm gold. Emily found herself looking at Daniel's calm figure, wondering how someone could live such a quiet life, yet carry such a strong presence. He didn't need loud words or dramatic gestures to make someone feel safe around him. His silence held kindness. His actions spoke loudly, even when he didn't. The morning chores passed gently. Emily carried water, Daniel fixed a broken latch, and the horses seemed more playful after the storm. One of them nuzzled Emily's arm, making her laugh softly. Daniel watched her with calm eyes, noticing how her smile seemed to come more easily today. "You're good with them," he said. She looked at the horse, and then back at Daniel. "Maybe they can feel how peaceful this place is." "Animals sense good hearts," Daniel replied simply. Emily didn't respond, but his words made her cheeks warm. When they finished the chores, they walked back to the house for breakfast. As they sat down at the small wooden table, Emily spoke quietly, tracing her fingers along the edge of her mug. "Daniel, tomorrow I should decide where to go," she whispered. "I can't stay here forever. This is your home, your life." Daniel didn't interrupt. He waited for her to finish. "I'm not scared anymore," she said. "But I don't want to make a wrong step. I don't want to fall back into the kind of life I left behind." Daniel folded his hands lightly on the table. "You don't have to rush," he said. "Take one step at a time. And whatever you choose, you won't be doing it alone." 8. Emily looked up with soft eyes. "You've done so much for me already." "I didn't do it for a reward," he said. "I did it because you needed help." She swallowed gently and nodded. She knew that. She felt it. It was one of the reasons she trusted him so deeply. After breakfast, they stepped outside again. The air felt warmer now, and birds flew in slow circles above the barn. Emily stood near the fence, her fingers resting lightly on the wooden rail. She looked across the open land and whispered, "It's beautiful here. I didn't know a place like this existed." "Ah." Daniel joined her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to be comforting. "It's quiet," he said simply. "That's what I love about it," she replied. "It feels like the world stops rushing." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Maybe that's what you needed." She turned toward him. "Maybe it's what I've always needed." A silence followed, a soft, gentle silence that wasn't empty but full of unspoken emotions. Emily looked at Daniel, at the man who had helped her without hesitation, who had opened his home when she was terrified and lost, who had treated her with respect and care in a way she wasn't used to. She took a slow breath. "Daniel, I don't think meeting you was an accident." Daniel met her gaze with steady eyes. "I don't think it was either." The wind blew lightly, brushing a strand of her hair across her cheek. Daniel reached out slowly, careful not to startle her, and gently moved the hair away from her face. It was a simple gesture, soft and respectful, but it carried a deep kindness. Emily's eyes glistened, not with fear, but with the soft emotion of someone realizing they were finally safe. "You gave me hope again," she whispered. "And you brought life back into this quiet place," Daniel replied quietly. She lowered her eyes for a moment. Then, with gentle honesty, she asked, "Do you want me to leave? Truly?" Daniel's breath slowed. He wasn't a man who spoke without meaning. Every word he chose mattered. "You should do what's right for you," he said. "But if you decide to stay a little longer, I won't mind." Emily smiled softly, her heart warming. "A little longer," she repeated. "I think I'd like that." Daniel nodded, his eyes gentle. "Then stay, as long as you need to." A sense of relief washed over her. She wasn't choosing out of fear anymore. She was choosing because she had found peace, strength, and safety in a place she never expected, and in a man she had met during the darkest hours of her journey. The rest of the day passed quietly. They fixed a loose step on the porch together. Emily helped Daniel arrange tools in the shed. They prepared a simple dinner and laughed softly when Emily dropped a spoon. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was natural, calm, and sincere. By evening, the sky turned a deep shade of orange. Emily and Daniel walked toward the fence again, watching the sun sink gently behind the hills. The colors stretched across the sky like a painting. Emily spoke first, her voice soft. "That night changed everything for me." Daniel looked at her, his expression warm. "For me too," he said. Emily turned slightly toward him. "Do you ever think about what your life would be like if we hadn't met?" Daniel took a slow breath. "I think I'd still be living the same quiet days," he said. "Working alone, eating alone, sleeping alone. Nothing would have changed." She nodded slowly. "And I would still be running." Their eyes met, and the unspoken meaning between them felt deep and gentle. "Meeting you showed me something," Emily whispered. "That kindness still exists. That trust is still possible. And that there are people in this world who don't want to hurt others." Daniel's voice softened. "And you showed me that even a quiet life can feel full again?" They stood there for a long time, watching the last of the light fade. The sky turned darker, but their hearts felt lighter. Emily finally said, "I think I've found the right direction now." Daniel asked softly, "Where does it lead?" Emily smiled, looking at the land and then at him. "For now, it leads here." Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His calm, steady eyes told her everything. A single night had changed everything, not because of big moments, but because two lonely souls had found trust, peace, and hope in each other. Emily wasn't lost anymore, and Daniel wasn't lonely anymore. They had found something rare, gentle, and life-changing. Something neither of them had been searching for, but both deeply needed.